Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Slott Symposium. This episode is titled Last Legs. It's a Spideydude Radio Network Comic Binge collaboration. Before we get started, I want to thank our patrons over for the Spideydude Radio Network at patreon.com/Spideydude Network. Patrons that you see up on the screen, thank you guys for your support. If you have not already checked out our other fine shows on the channel, like the Ultimate Spideydude Experience, Books of X, our Patreon first show that has a new episode that's already out. If you have not checked out our great interviews with Juan Ferreira, Greg Wiseman, and JMD Mateus, go do that. If you've not checked out the Spideydude Experience, where me and Adam talk a lot about the latest 2 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, we got ASM Classics, Clone Saga Chronicles, and Spectacular Radio. Want to do a programming note for the network, though. Voices from the Eyrie taking a brief hiatus, but they will be back very soon for brand new episodes. So, with that, I do turn it over to Paul. Hello, Paul.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Slott Symposium, the Spideydude Experience, and the Comic Binge joint adventure, if you will, or my voyage, as I love to say, right, Adam? So
the Slott-tastic voyage.
I like that. I like that.
Slott-tastic. We have another inappropriate name in our group chat,
but you know, the cool thing about the Slott Symposium so far is it's been a really cool to experience this, I think, very historic Spider-Man run. Whether you love it or hate it, it's historic in the fact that how long it went for. And you know, because of the history with Zach, we keep talking about not loving it as much as me. It's been such a treat to read these issues again and to experience it and have Adam experience a lot of these for the first time. And can I get like a different sense? And like, is it as good as we remember? Is it as bad as I remember in Zach's case? And it's been really cool to go back as a giant Spider-Man fan, because I feel like in the Spider-Man podcasting area, people don't reflect on these, like, especially Slott. It's such a lightning rod, if you will. Mm-hmm. And it feels like it's kind of cool to go back and give it an honest take one way or another. And obviously, you can think one of us is being biased one way or another, but it really is really exciting and fun to kind of go back and really dissect these issues for what they are, instead of like being a part of Brand New Day, whether you hate Brand New Day or you love Brand New Day or whatever. So it's really cool to get a different perspective almost in some ways when you go back and you read these issues and you're like, man, like this is really get a different headspace, if you will, for these issues. And today we're talking about issues 581, 582, 590, 591, and then the ever freaking awesome, and I can't wait to talk about it, issue 600. So
I love how you call it
big boy.
Awesome. There's some things about that book that I like, but
we'll get your popcorn ready, because it could get heated.
And that's also one of the reasons that we are pre-recording this and not doing a live stream, because we don't know how it's going to go. So we are probably in the comment section down below with you guys. Give it that like, share, subscribe if you have not already. 5-star review on the audio side. We'll read any feedback on future episodes.
Yeah.
But
really quickly, please subscribe to the Comic Binge, because I've been hemorrhaging I think subscribers, and maybe it's because people hate my guts, but I've lost like 12, 14 recently.
No!
I think I think it's because of the bots are wearing off, Adam. So, yeah. So we'll see. I mean, maybe half of it's bots, maybe it's half people who hate my guts. Either way, doesn't really matter. But please subscribe. I appreciate it.
And if you're watching this on the Comic Binge side, go subscribe to us as well. So, you know,
yes,
let's cross some streams here, because we are usually simulcasting on both. But so we're not going to do the recaps, because on Slott Symposium we expect you to read the issues beforehand. But our first issue,
if you feel so inclined,
if you feel so inclined. Our first issue we're covering tonight is
91.
Oh, that's what. Yeah,
there we go.
There we go. 581. Yeah. So,
or 81. Excuse me. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. A very interesting story here. With Harry and the Molten Man. Give me your take, Paul, because I've got a lot of thoughts on this.
Well, first of all, I do have a couple pet peeves. First of all, I hate dating comic book stories like 2008 right here. Like with the sliding scale that we have for the Marvel Universe, it's just like, why do we give us a date? Just don't do that. You know, it's just a personal pet peeve. You know, this was a very interesting tale because we hadn't seen the Molten Man in a while. And to be truth be told, at this when I first read these issues, it was just kind of catching up with Harry, obviously, and with Liz and Norman, little Normie, I should say, and just getting kind of back into their world a little bit. Like they were slowly piecing together when Brand New Day started. For those who don't know, if you're just watching this for the first time, they brought back Harry Osborn, and we didn't know how that happened. They kind of just snuck that in there. And in these two issues, we got the origin of how Harry came back, and which we'll get into. It was very in retrospect of reading a lot of more Spider-Man comics since then, as far as the history, it has shades of the Spectacular Spider-Man issues where Spider-Man goes to meet Harry and Liz at their house in Queens. It's in the middle of nowhere, so it felt like it was definitely a callback to that.
Yeah,
that
issue. I was thinking about that. Yeah, Peter Parker. I think Spectacular Spider-Man 63.
Yeah, and it's. I think the Molten Man's in that issue, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, he is. Else? There's a fight at their house in New Jersey, so this is like the sequel, kind of.
Yeah,
like 30 years later.
Yeah, and it's cool because Slott uses this as a way to get Peter and him to talk about and reveal the how Harry came back from the dead from the legendary James DeMatteis Spectacular Spider-Man 200 issue. You know, and we'll have a lot to say about that, I assume, but I think these two issues are fun for what they are. The artist, Mike McCone, is such an underrated artist. I really like his stuff.
Oh my God, it's so good.
He's so efficient. He's so efficient. And, you know, I really, you know, again, I'm going to say this every episode for the Slott Symposium, because I think it's critical for people to know the style of writing that Slott does. And you have to remember that Slott does old school Marvel style. What that means is that the artist does the pages and he does the dialogue afterwards, for the most part. And it really shows, because it just, in all these issues, I'm going to say, and I'll say it again for the issues we have later on, it just flows. There's a fluidity to when I can almost, not all the time, but a lot of times I can tell when a writer is like, here's my script, and the artist has to like kind of match that, you know, verbatim, and within retrospect, of course, you can tell the artist has a lot of creativity, a lot of flow in this that Slott goes with and he rolls with. And I really appreciate that about his comic writing style. And I think it's kind of a dying art, if you will. I wish they'd bring back. If I'm going to, I guess we can just kind of some of these, for me, as we'll get to the details here. These two issues are not inoffensive. I don't think they're incredibly great. They're not incredibly bad by any means. I think if you went and said these are awful, I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, because you haven't read many comics, probably, because there's way worse than this, in my opinion. But no, I just, before we get into like the really nitty gritty stuff, I think I would say these are, they're pushing Brand New Day narrative. I don't love the roommate Ven. Never really liked him that much. I understood like the complexity of having that roommate who hates Spider-Man thing, but yeah, like I think these are not bad issues. They're not great. They're not something I'm like, I can't wait to read these again. It's fine. I mean, but you know what, again, this is coming out 3 times a week or 3 times a month, excuse me. And these have to be very efficiently told, even more so I'd say than a normal monthly issue. This is like, but at the same time, for what we get, like there's a lot, this is not these are not quick issues. It took some time to read these actually, because so I give McCone and Slott credit. I think they did solid work here. It's not great. It's not like oh my god, but this is not bad. So I would say, if I don't know if you want to grade these, I guess I'd give them probably a solid, probably B minus, B, or not B minus. Let's say B. I say B is pretty solid on these. These are not, I wouldn't say they're below average or below a B. A B minus feels like it's an insult, because I think these are not bad issues. And so I would say overall, before we get into nitty gritty, I'd give these issues a B.
Okay, so I originally gave these an F. Originally,
you're insane.
But now he's a new man. This was 20 years ago.
This was 15 years
almost.
ago. 15 years ago.
All right, fair enough.
So I am giving them a C minus. And let me explain why, because I have similar criticisms of what I said back then. But because this is actually one of Don's favorite lines from me on Crawl Space, that I waited a year and 36 issues for this, in terms of the explanation of Harry. However, the A plot, the Molten Man plot with Harry, I think works a little better. Taking the emotions of Brand New Day out of it for a minute, I think that works better. I think McCone is cooking. McCone is the best thing about this book, in my opinion, these two books. But the Harry explanation completely leaves me underwhelmed, because it just kind of felt like it was a hand wave, right? When I was reading these issues, I did kind of get back in that headspace of like, man, I'm annoyed, because I just felt like there was so much here, and it was just like, hey, that Mysterio in Europe, and the thing that killed me didn't kill me, it kept me alive. Good. And it was kind of like looking at the reader and saying, is that satisfactory enough for you? And then we're going to move on. And it's like that. It felt like that was the agenda of these two issues, was to just kind of, hey, we're tired of people asking the question about Harry's return and how he came back. So we're just going to come up with this sometimes, right? The simplest explanation is just make the explanation. But I'm like, does that fit? Does that work? It still didn't work for me. And I felt like that was something that was addressed better later on with Spencer, even though it got really wonky and convoluted at the end.
Definitely.
But I felt like there was a little more effort with Spencer, as opposed to, it was like, hey, we're just going to keep it simple, stupid. And this was used to obviously set up what we're going to talk about next episode, which is the Mysterioso arc. So it's like, okay, at the time we didn't know that, but here, I think the dynamic between Liz and Harry is off, and it felt off. But I can understand why they were writing it this way, because I feel like it makes a little more sense here now that I've reread it.
Can you hit the next cover? By the way, sorry, let's keep it flowing.
Sure.
That's covers.
That's a good cover.
Listen, I would like to see Mike McCone come back. Him and Barry Kitson, I thought, were two artists that they introduced in Brand New Day that I thought just absolutely stole the show whenever they did show up. Even on the issues that I absolutely despise, like the Joe Kelly Black Cat issues that they did. I don't remember if it was before or after this. I think it was after this. They were pretty to look at, but man, Joe Kelly was so hit or miss for me. So that's why I didn't like these issues. I don't hate them as much as I did before. Taking the emotions out of it, I'm like, these are okay. And I kind of feel like we're at a similar level, but we're grading them a little bit differently.
Put the issue back up. That's a pretty cover. I want to miss it. There we go. Thank you.
All right.
We have a lot to talk about with the Liz and Harry stuff. Adam, what, I'm assuming you read these for the first time, and what was your take on, what's your grade?
I think I'll go like C plus B minus maybe.
Okay.
Because
I'm gonna give. I'll put the B- up since that's the higher grade.
All right.
Oh boy.
Yeah, the art's good. I feel like, well, this will blow everyone's. I mean, McCone's fine. I mean, I respect the talent, the craft. I appreciate it, but I think it's a little too realistic for me sometimes. I liked in this issue with the Molten Man cover. I liked that there were two different inkers. One guy was doing thicker inks on his stuff, and I thought that looked really good. So I kind of like that the most art-wise. Yeah, plot. I mean, I appreciate that we're keeping Slott's plots going because the Molten Man serum cure thing is from our last episode, New Ways to Die. So I'm glad that got some follow-up.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, Harry coming back, I mean, I guess it could have been worse. I feel like this feels like this feels like I guess a standard, the character died, but this is how he came back thing. Like it could have been convoluted, like Spencer's. The end of Spencer's run got really convoluted for the explanation of Kindred, which is why we're all thinking we're calling shenanigans. And I think that this is like, okay, it works. There's like, I guess this is a stretch, but you could say it was a stretch that
it's
Norman
all
died
stretch.
and came. Yeah, it's all a stretch.
Oh, exactly.
But it's all like,
exactly.
it was a stretch. It was a stretch that Norman came back when he died because Norman was dead.
Yeah, but they at least made the attempt to try to fit the continuity of.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're doing it. Technically, they're doing that here too.
Exactly.
I don't know if it's as effective, but I would say it's more effective than if we were to compare the end of the Spencer run.
So my
what that ended up being, at least.
Right. So my one pushback on, yes, it's similar, is I just didn't feel the effort was there in this, that the effort with Glenn Greenberg and them trying to make it make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't feel like we were getting that same vibe with this that we do with the return of Norman, because this invalidates part of Norman's motivations for returning too.
Right. Yeah.
And that kind of creates a sticky situation of, okay, well, why is Norman talking to Harry's grave if Harry's been alive this whole time? It's
right.
just because, I mean, that was such a visceral thing in Norman's return, was Harry's death. That's the catalyst to bring him back.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've taken that away. So how do we make Norman make sense? Other than Norman's just, at this point, he's king of the world, basically. Mm-hmm. So we're pulling, it's like, I view the Harry Goblin Norman situation as like a Jenga set, and we're pulling these pieces and then stacking them on top, but eventually it kind of collapses on the overall picture. And you understand what I'm saying?
Listen,
I want to say real quick that
go ahead,
when you take into account too, like JMD's magnificent spectacular 200, it's like, man, I mean, that's because that's like I feel like that, because I think it makes more sense to revive Norman the way they did than to do the same thing with Harry, a decade, 2 decades later almost,
Yeah.
The Harry thing is so much more final that it's like, did we have to do this? But this is why I've said, like, sometimes I do think of the One More Day, Brand New Day thing is they just rebooted Spider-Man without. They did it in a cheeky way.
Yeah.
So now I want to make this very clear that I don't think that you're wrong, and I think that resurrecting Harry was ultimately the best idea considering all what you're saying, Zach and Adam, I would say no. The problem is as a comic book fan, I think you guys all, and I've told this countless times to Neil when he's bitching and moaning about whatever, retcon and and then I don't mean like in a disrespectful way. I'm just being real that like, I'm like, well, welcome to mainstream comics. This is what they do. And
that's fair.
And I think that like, no, there are better ways to do it. I'm not saying this is like the best way, but when I look in context of the world at large, outside of the main story of like Spider-Man, the Raimi trilogy just wrapped up.
Right.
There's a lot of Harry in those movies.
Yeah.
There's no Harry in these comics. The problem is they're not really knowing what they're doing with like Ultimate Spider-Man and like how is that, longevity wise, and obviously I think here's my honest take on this real quick. I think that in hindsight, if they knew that Harry, that the whole young Spider-Man and try to emulate the Raimi trilogy as much as possible, and not as much as possible, but to kind of make that character young again and feel like familiar for people, for new readers, and having the Harry character in there without those movies and without trying to go backwards and say, we need to make Spider-Man single again to make him relevant. I think they don't resurrect Harry. I think they leave him dead. And it probably isn't. And I think that this is probably Dan Slott's probably the best, was probably the only person capable of doing it the best job possible, in my opinion. At that point, because Mark Waid had just come on, and this has probably already been preordained, years before, or a year or whatever before they wrote the issue. It's just a matter of when they're going to write it.
Well,
so
to be fair to Slott too, I'll also say this: I think he was probably the of the group that was writing at the time, because they had changed.
The one
he's the one that actually gave a shit, because Wells
exactly.
Wells had already left, Gale had already left.
Gale.
Dan's they had brought in Joe Kelly, they brought in Mark Waid and Fred Van Linte, and that became the new group.
And Guggenheim too was still part of it.
Yeah, Guggenheim he's on his way out, because his final issues are the character assassination that take place between these books that we're covering tonight. So he's about to go basically create the DC TV multiverse with Arrow, and provide that foundational parts. So which kudos to him, because I loved a lot of that. I didn't love all of it, but I loved a lot of it.
But yeah, Slott was the one. I think he should have been the one, like you said, he gave a shit the most, and he tried to make it work within. And I think that to me is ultimately like, because he used Mysterio, and that was fun. It was, and like Adam, you said it was short, or maybe you or Zach, one of you said that it was short and kind of to the point, and I appreciated it then. I appreciate it now, to be honest. It's, God bless Spencer. His run is really good, except for the end, and maybe I need to reread the end to like really see how bad it was in comparison, to everything else. But yeah, maybe we'll do the Spencer Symposium one day.
Rehash season 1.
Yeah. Hey, because listen, years and context and retrospect always will not always, but will adjust your opinion for good, for better, for worse. But
if nothing else, reading all the Kindred stuff and how, like, how did they botch that? Because they dropped some balls there.
They did, because Kindred's a great character. Kindred's a great character up until the end. So I mean,
it's an interesting mystery.
Yeah.
And,
I think to wrap up for this, because I think the only thing really worth talking about is the Harry stuff, to be honest. If we want to wrap that up here in a second and move on. But I'll just kind of say my final piece that I get it, in a perfect world, you leave Harry dead.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be real. Like, and that's the thing.
You leave in a perfect world, truthfully, you leave all three of the deaths that JMD did. You leave Craven dead, you leave Aunt May dead, and you leave Harry dead. Like the Aunt May thing, that wasn't even to do with them with this, so that's a completely separate thing. But in a perfect world, you leave those three deaths what they were because of the impact of how they were written. Like those are all three classic stories that just don't mess with.
Yeah, at least Harry, they didn't at least they didn't say like, oh, the Harry that died was a fake.
Was a genetically modified actress because we couldn't say the word clone anymore. So yeah, which is the that's the greatest Oscar-worthy performance. Is what are you going to do? Norman's sitting there, in the director's chair, casting the Aunt May. You're going to play the role of a dead woman, but you're actually going to die. How do you feel about that?
You know what though? Like again, like it makes me appreciate this, even though it's not perfect. I think this is adequate for what it is. It's not
convoluted.
I will say
it's not convoluted.
The one this is like a overall Brand New Day point. Slott probably did the best trying to bring the continuity between the stories,
for sure,
and trying to be the glue, because the other guys, that's just not their strength, and it's really telling in especially these 5 issues tonight. By this point, you're getting guys that are just wanting to write just random, and because they also brought Roger Stern in at this point. I think that the Roger Stern issue is actually after these 2 issues, so that was the return of Stern.
And just to really want to put a cherry on top on the Liz and Harry stuff, I disagree, because I actually thought that was actually pretty interesting, considering because where Liz is now, it makes a lot more sense when I read these issues and how angry she would be. I thought Slott nailed that personally. I'm not sure which one you guys said that, but I'll push back and say I think the characterization of Liz makes a lot of sense in retrospect of why Harry coming back is a big deal. He understands that they're not going to have a relationship, but he wants to try to be I appreciated all that. I thought that was really how Slott integrated that is, I think, underrated in my opinion. That's why I gave it a B. It's not perfect because it's a lot going on.
But thinking about it, I kind of relate a lot more to that dynamic.
Sure.
Of trying to co-parent and having there be a distance of some sort. So I think the Harry Liz thing, it did feel off, but it's supposed to feel off maybe, now that we're kind of
exactly. That's why I think it works for me, because it feels like almost like a new, not a characterization, but it's like the new era of Liz and little Normie at that point. Because I feel like Liz's trajectory makes a lot of sense now in retrospect to this, especially with the Molten Man, or how she's inheriting a bunch of Harry stuff.
She don't need a damn symbiote though.
I don't know anything about that, so that's something.
It's actually the book is actually pretty good because it goes into the lore a lot more. I don't like the concept on its face of her getting a symbiote, but that's a whole.
I had no idea she had a symbiote, so I have no idea.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of good Normie stuff with that series, and they have her get a symbiote too, but because it's building off of what Spencer did. But I still I'm so sick of that being the only thing we're doing with Spider-Man related characters these days. It feels like. Whole different other podcast. So we're going to move on to 591.
Put 590, 591.
Yeah, 590.
This cover is fantastic.
Yeah. So the two issue story again with Slott. Very interesting story here, because it kind of glosses over probably one of the most boring parts of Brand New Day, and kind of does an effective job explaining it away. Because the mayoral race I could give 0 F's about.
Yes.
Once character assassination, because I'm pretty sure character assassination happened between these two, where we finally find out who Menace is and all that stuff. which was Guggenheim's pet character. Again, they had these pet characters, and you couldn't touch those things, except the only one that I felt like could touch it was Slott, because he would just do a couple of crumbs and Easter eggs here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as we talked about in episode 0, I love that Human Torch miniseries with Spider-Man, and I feel like Slott could write a Fantastic Four ASM book, or just like a team up book where it's just them doing random shenanigans and stuff, and I would read it willingly. So yeah, let's just do the grades right quick first. Paul,
Yeah.
what's
You know, I'm going to be a little controversial on this one. I'm going to say that I'll probably give this a C+.
Wow. C+.
These are my
okay.
These are probably some of my least favorite Dan Slott issues I've read.
Wow. Okay.
Now,
Adam, what's your grade?
Well, let me explain what my grade is, and then we can go forward. But I just want to say this, that there's some fun stuff in here.
Mm-hmm.
I feel the Microverse is really poorly explained, to be quite honest. It's very confusing. And I feel that there's a lot like the main plot is so not interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't care.
It's kind of yeah, okay. I can see that.
And so, like, the interest is supposed to be the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. I almost think it'd be better if they were just vacationing together and then Human Torch and Spider-Man got in a big fight.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it feels like that would be funner and more interesting than like, we gotta fight these bad guys. I still don't understand what happened. It doesn't even matter. I don't even care.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm just too stupid to realize it, but
honestly, well, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I'll just make it quick. I really don't have much to say about these issues, to be honest. There's a lot of fun. Like the art is super good, and there's some funny things. Like the looter scene is hilarious. That was great. You know, and Slott he knows how to make humor with Spider-Man. He really does. I don't, and because I'll make this very clear. I didn't read the Human Torch miniseries until we did these episodes. So I had no context. So it was very confusing to me. Like, well, how does Peter know? Like, because I never understood that. Like, how do they know he's Spider-Man? Because when I was reading comics when I was a kid, they never knew.
Right.
And so when Human Torch was like, I'm so mad, I don't know who you are, Spider-Man. I'm just like, I don't really care. And I still don't care, even after reading it. I had to remember, like, okay. And like, these aren't terrible books. I just didn't really care about the main plot, and I just didn't really care about the whole Spider-Man secret identity of the Fantastic Four thing, because I feel, and this is just maybe, I hate to put my old man hat on, but it felt like the Spider-Man is like a majorly close to the Fantastic Four. We're talking like super close, right? Like we're talking like we're a part of the family. I never felt like he was part of the family.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was a close ally. Part of the family is a whole other story.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like that's been forced on us the last 15 years, opposed to like always kind of being the case. And I felt like it's almost like I'm expected to go along with the fact that, oh yeah, Spider-Man and Fantastic Four, like Peter and Johnny are like brothers. I'm like, fuck that. Like that's not like how they are at all. Like they're kind of like adversarial, and they just kind of like, and I feel like Slott really tried to like build that up with the Human Torch miniseries and now with this and now with Hickman. And it's just like, let's be real. Like I accept it now, but even then, and now as I read this, I'm like, this isn't how it was. And it just doesn't really ring true to me. So C-, or I'd say B, C+. I said C+, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I say again, aren't terrible. Just they're average, a little above average.
Okay, so Adam, your grade.
Yeah, I'd probably go with a C+.
C plus. Okay, so I'm going to be contrarian, and I'm going to give this an A minus because these are my favorite
Damn.
issues of this episode. And I told Adam this before we got started. I was like, I love these 2 issues. I hated the other 2 issues comparatively, and I'm kind of meh in the middle of the road on 600. But I like when Slott writes the 5 of these characters together. It feels like out of everybody in the Marvel universe, Peter would be the only one that's not like previously established in the 4, like, you know, Scott and She-Hulk and stuff like that. Like, if there's a solo Marvel character that would be accepted in the family, it would be Peter in a lot of ways.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So it makes there's a logic there that I'm okay with.
But acting like he's a part of the family is different than being like as a backup member, and that's why I don't understand, or not understand. I didn't agree with
that. That makes sense because Peter works better as a loner. I agree with you on that.
I like him I liked him in the Avengers, but that's different because that wasn't like you've always been an Avenger, Peter. Like that's not really how it was. Whereas this, it's like you're always been part of the family. It's like. Not really.
I don't like Bendis writing Peter in the Avengers because he's just Jokey McJoke pants, and that's all he does. That's like his only function in the Avengers. But I understood from a metaphysical standpoint why you're putting all your heavy hitters. You're making the Avengers the elite team.
It's their JLA.
It's their JLA. Yeah, that New Avengers is the is to Marvel what the JLA is to DC.
And to be fair, really quickly, you know. That got me back into comics, was seeing that because I always wanted Spider-Man to be Avenger, and the idea that Bendis was like, let's do our JLA for Avengers. I was like, well, finally, that's what I've been asking for like since I was a kid, and seeing that, and then seeing the perfect jumping on opportunity of the other, it got me back into reading on a regular basis. I had already read a bunch of JMS stuff before that. That was like the lead-in, like, okay, Spider-Man comics are pretty tight, and I knew he was still writing Spider-Man at the time. I'm like, okay, I can jump back into this, and that was that's a whole different podcast.
And look, having you guys were talking about that early spectacular stuff with the last set of books. Having reread those very recently, I can understand now. I didn't have that context also before that I do now. So to be fair to my old self, I didn't know any better.
Yeah. That's fine. And that's fair. And that's the whole point of the Slott Symposium is like, because sometimes, again, when you read something, it may not resonate as well as you read it now. And again, like I want to put, you might have some what's the word we're looking for? Some regional biases, maybe you could say, of why you may not like the book. I'll just put it out there. But again, I'm not saying that that did influence you, but it doesn't help either way. It doesn't make it easier to accept something when everyone around you is like, this book is terrible because brand new day. Bleh! So anyway, continue.
Look, me being a part of that during that time and being part of the underground movement against it, so to speak, gives it a lot more credit than I should. But I remember liking these issues at the time and rereading them again. I love the opening scenes. I love the looter stuff. I agree. The Microverse as a concept and that is half baked.
Hit the next cover too. Where you're at it.
Because honestly, I didn't care about that stuff. I cared more about the FF stuff than I did. And this also is significantly important because we knew about the psychic blind spot as a concept but nobody explained it to us. And again, Slott kind of getting forced to have to play editorial here and explain something.
Like in this.
Yeah. And in both cases that they're very similar in that way, because Slott gets tasked with, okay, we got, and I'll partially sort of take some credit because Crawl Space was so big and we were so involved and we had Wacker and Slott on the front page and the message board at the time. Like there are certain things that, okay, we got to address this with the fan base. Hopefully this will pacify them. It didn't.
But that was going to happen eventually. I mean, I'm not trying to be like, you guys did nothing, but they're going to have to eventually explain that. Even as someone who was kind of listening to your guys' podcast and disagreeing with pretty much everything you guys said about the book, it seemed like, I would be like, well, yeah, of course they're going to have to explain. This is a pretty big deal. He was completely revealed who he was, right before everyone knew who he was. So they have a choice.
We say that too, but then you've got an entire story where Mary Jane's pregnant. We see the baby go somewhere, and when we don't want to explain the baby, we're just going to pretend it never happened.
That is a completely different thing, though. Like that is
but they still, because they didn't want to. They were trying to play.
I understand. I understand.
So knowing what editorial did in the past, I think that there was this thought process. Oh, they're just never going to explain it. So I got to give Slott props, and I think I did at the time, especially with these two issues, of him actually trying to explain, how does this work? Okay, you unmask and you remember everything. So all of their memories come back. Okay, that puts the onus back on Peter.
Right.
And gives Peter the ability to say, hey, this is who I am. And puts that genie back in the bottle. I do, and we'll talk about this in the next issue that we're covering. I do get annoyed about the Daredevil thing, but that's a whole thing. But yeah, I like the overall plot. The bit at the very end, though, I thought was a stroke of genius. Jonah being the mayor, I think, is a really interesting plot point.
Well, and just to kind of throw this out there, these whole two issues were meant to like escalate time, right? To get things moving a little bit faster. Which I'll give Slott credit. I did laugh at the with like it's like Peter's talking, and the times like going back like really fast. I will say that was fun. That was cute. So, but yeah, it was a device to get things where they needed to go a lot faster, which was clever, but also poorly explained, I think, within the actual issues of the comic book itself.
Yeah, personally. Yeah. It kind of, we're not sitting there, it felt like a little Princess Bridey, where allegedly we cut out like 60 pages of them explaining the wardrobe. If you what I'm talking about, when we get the abridged version, it's like, okay, yeah, we don't need to sit there and talk about Maze, trying to find dresses and Harry's relapse and and Carly and him becoming close and all that fun, the Vin Gonzalez thing, and then now we can kind of start building towards that resolution with the Spider Tracer killer and all that fun stuff. Which again does not get resolved with Slott, that gets resolved with character assassination. So I just think that, I think we're like, okay, we're starting to get close to 600. Now we got to start really ramping things up and making that make sense. So I that's why I think it works effectively. And they didn't get the Parker Luck right a lot during Brand New Day, but this issue felt like this was the Parker Luck. The one guy that hates me the most is now the mayor of New York. Built on irony, that's ironic. So, props to Slott.
I was just like, well, I mean, yeah, they're fine 2 issues. I was just thinking, well, basically this is just a means to an end for the Fantastic Four to know who he is again, because Slott established that in the mini. So
Yeah.
and
Well,
I thought
it was a way to explain the secret identity too, right? So like
yeah that
killing
that
two
too.
birds with
But it
one
was
stone.
yeah. So it's fine. And yeah, it wasn't the time skipping was fine, but I didn't like that it basically ruins Peter's life. I thought that was too much.
Yeah,
I
the element of ruining Peter's life I don't like, but the element of making Spider-Man's life more complicated,
Sure.
that part I liked. I agree with you. Like, it's like, oh, because this is
It
the
gives
whole
it gives it stakes.
Yeah.
But it's just too much. Like, oh, he's gone for like a month. And it's like,
2 months. He's gone for 2 months.
2 months.
And so now he's a month behind on rent, and
that's quite a pickle, as Wells wrote in an issue around Dark Web or so.
So it's like, this is also the standpoint of Marvel editorial going, Peter's a loser. Peter's a loser. Peter's a loser. Remember, Peter's a loser. Do you remember this? Peter's a loser. And that's like that. I don't blame that on Slott. That's editorial again, and that's something that we've kind of talked about over the process of the show. Is that
and then again, it's a whacker / Joe Quesada thing. That I would say it's more of a Joe Q thing than anything. Like we talked about on so that's just whacker being the good soldier for Joe, being like, Joe wants Peter to be just, because he watched that Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2 movie and wants to really just be like, that's Spider-Man. It's like,
that was Brevoort's manifesto.
Yeah, that's Brevoort, but Brevoort, aka and Joe. I mean, that's
two of them. They were and which, by the way, Spider-Man 2, I never liked that about Raimi's films about Spider-Man 2, where it just felt like he was dumping on Peter Parker. I'm like, this is not the Parker luck. This is like that on steroids. So
it's the one criticism I have of Spider-Man 2. I don't have a lot, but that's one of them.
I have a few, but yeah, that's definitely the biggest one, I would say.
Like if he had pulled it back just a hair, I think it would have made it perfect.
I can see that. Yeah. So wrapping up, I think these are probably my weakest of the issues that we've read so far of Dan Slott, personally.
Which, again, this is what this show is all about. We're probably going to be on the opposite ends of things, but we're having this respectful discourse. It does not happen very often.
I think
no, it does not.
I think I want to pose this question now, because I read these 4 issues and I'm like, I'm ready for a singular voice on the book. I haven't read the other Brand New Day stuff, but I'm like, all these side plots, I don't know if, they get covered, but it's like, whatever. I don't know. I'm ready for like a singular voice. Are you guys kind of feeling that too? Or
so we are over a year in to this era, and the fatigue is there. And I
agree with that.
That was such a huge issue with Brand New Day in general, having so many people working on the book. The tone of it was so inconsistent, so up and down, so a bunch of stuff that I didn't care about. And I'll be honest, there was a lot of pounding on the table of, okay, well, if we're going to have one voice, like Slott feels like the natural successor to this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it really shows when we're just reading the Slott stuff. Like, knowing where we're going to end up going, like, this makes a lot of, it's a good experiment. It's something that had never been done at Marvel before, doing a damn near weekly book. But, we're going to get to the 3-year mark. This is definitely, we're in year 2 now at this point. And yeah, things are going to, I think Marvel saw the writing on the wall. Okay, we did this for a solid 3 years, basically didn't miss a single ship date. If we did,
it's impressive. It's impressive.
Yeah, it was like almost 100 issues, I think, at that point. or 150 issues. So they did. They did the due diligence, and credit to Wacko.
I can tell you that I always thought, and it's very evident because of the show, obviously, I always thought Slott was the best writer for the book. I thought Guggenheim was second, personally. I thought Wade was okay. He never did anything that blew me away. Joe Kelly was solid. You know, I thought he had some good, bad issues, whatever. You know, they had a couple random. Zeb Wells that wasn't on it very long, I thought, whatever, to be really make a mark, in my opinion. But this, I would say, I always thought Slott did a good job, but and just a good segue, if you want to throw up 600 here, I think 600 for me was what definitively told me this is the book. And I'm not sure if one of you guys wants to, if you can grab the splash page of Doc Ock in the full review. Yeah, there you go, right there.
This is the second print variant. So,
but it's basically that just with a different background. This issue, in my opinion, guys, is one of my favorites of Brand New Day. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we talked a lot about already in these previous 4 issues, guys, that Slott knows his continuity and respects it and tries to intertwine as much as he can. The opening of this comic book is so good because it goes back and really emphasizes, and there's a great inspired idea here that is obviously set up for so much down the line, which but by itself, and I want to make this very clear, 600 by itself is a great issue based upon the previous stories of Dr. Octopus and incorporating all of them into this issue that you get where Dr. Octopus is at where he's at today. And it's a truly inspired idea, not to mention all that it's inspired and transcends, happens and transcends afterwards. But I think this comic book is so good and such a to me is a classic Spider-Man versus Dr. Octopus issue and battle. And there's been great battles between them, right? To me, this is one of the best. It's not the best, it's one of the top 5, in my opinion. People will talk about like the Eric Larson, Michelini stuff, which is solid. I would take this over that because that's just fun. Not a lot of meat on the bone in that, in my opinion. It's just Eric Larson, just, redesigning the character, and making him a lot more deadly.
I love that suit. The suit.
I love it too. I love it too. But I think from a narrative standpoint and a characterization standpoint, I think this issue is by far better. And I love this issue. I think it's great. I'm talking strictly on Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus, not the other subplot stuff.
Yeah.
Whatever. Which is hard. You have to account for that. I understand. I wouldn't begrudge anyone or you guys to be like, I didn't like it because of this, that, or whatever for those reasons. But if I'm talking strictly as a Spider-Man fan, I adored this issue. I remember I read it. I'm like, and this was the issue I think truly defined, like they need to put Slott on full time because he gets it. And that issue, that scene where the full reveal of Dr. Octopus and where he is now as a character, I thought was brilliant. And like I said, I think this issue is a one of the best issues of that era, if not the best, maybe. Again, I'm just having all the Brand New Day issues, and I don't know if I ever will, or I will eventually when I do my go back on my reread. But just reading these Slott issues, which are always usually my favorites, and especially when I look back to issues 590 and 91. This issue, I thought it was really, really well done on multiple levels. Well, I'll touch on the Daredevil stuff when you talk about it there, Zach. But to me, this is an A+. I love this issue, and maybe I'm a little. But I would say it's an A+ still, regardless, because even the other stuff I don't really hate or just it's like whatever. But yeah, I think this is a fantastic A+, home run story of Spider-Man.
See, I'm not going to agree with you on it being A+. I'm going to give it a B.
Hey, I was expecting more. Okay, or less. Okay, fair enough.
I'm going to give it a B-. this reading it now in the context, like I didn't go back during Superior and reread this. Reading this and knowing that this is the genesis of his magnum opus, which is Dying Wish, right? 100 issues later. There's some really great ways he does the paneling. The Otto stuff is the best part of this issue. I give zero fucks though about Aunt May and her marrying J. Jonah Jameson Jr.
Yeah, we know.
I give and I know that's my bias against Aunt May. I get that. I don't hate Aunt May, but
you hate Aunt May.
I just wish the old bat was dead. Either she needs to know Peter's Spider-Man or she needs to die. That's where I'm at.
I can agree with that.
Like
more or less.
I can see that. Yeah, more. Yeah, I'm with Adam.
Like
that's mostly my position. I think I was thinking about it today actually. Like you could probably keep her in the dark, but I feel like if you're gonna keep her in the dark, he should probably still be married to Mary Jane or something.
Like especially having gone back and reread those early JMS issues, it just feels like it works because Peter's guilt is why she doesn't know. But if Peter's going to ever become a functionable adult as Spider-Man, Aunt May knowing is almost necessary.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it also makes Aunt May a better character. The reason why the reveal before she dies at 400 is earned is that she literally is able to ease Peter's burden of that guilt, and he can come to a place of acceptance that she is proud of, not just
that actress, man. She was cooking.
Killed it, man. But like when it's that listen, I was the living embodiment of your guilt towards Ben and how you failed Ben. It's okay. Being Spider-Man is okay. And then for JMS to when she finds out that it doesn't break her and she's stronger than Peter gives her credit for, makes her a more three-dimensional character, in my opinion. Instead of just being the living embodiment of his failure, it's that you know, and that's why it works also why it works, I think, in the Insomniac game too. They did that so beautifully and effectively. So, and building off of what they did here with Slott, with the Feast Center and all that stuff. So, to me, this felt like, hey, you know, on a long-running sitcom, we have to have a wedding. That's what this feels like to me on that, and from that element, and that standpoint. The Carly stuff really irritates me when I read this book. This is where the Crawl Space deemed it the Carly hammer, where they're beating you over the head with it. This is a really good example of that. And this is why I did not like Carly Cooper as a character until somebody else besides Slott wrote her. She got better over time when Slott was the only writer, but like this was just like, oh God, Carly's insufferable in these books. And she's worse. She's a homicidal maniac half the time with Joe Kelly, but like she's not a likable character here. The MJ reveal at the end with what they did with it, don't cute. Like it. This is cute. Like MJ being fashionably late to the wedding was funny, and Aunt Anna kind of being mischievous and inviting Mary Jane, I thought was great. That felt like Aunt Anna to me. So yeah, like that's fun and cute. They did set that up obviously in the Slott issues with her trying to call Peter and his voicemail being completely, full.
Right.
So the other thing I want to talk about too is this is an impressive book because it's a thick boy.
This is 3 issues.
It's 3 issues, and it's the first time that Amazing Spider-Man had 100 pages in it that were all completely new material. And Walker set out to make this a memorable book in that way, and I think he did a good job. Yes, the backups are kind of like, they eventually do matter. The main bulk of the story is Slott. We're not going to talk about the backups, but I want to mention that this is a editorial marvel and a feat that they pulled off. I also thought some of the in jokes were hilarious. Rereading these in retrospect, I mean, the bit of trolling that Brubaker did and Bendis does, it's a little bit of trolling on the four fake covers in there, because obviously it's page padding, but like I can appreciate them now a little bit more as an adult than I did back then. I was annoyed by them back then, but the main story, the Otto stuff, the thing I don't like about the Otto stuff is that it kind of puts Otto in a corner long term, but I can roll with it. Does that make sense?
I knew what they were doing then. I mean, like I said, every time there's that illusion of change, right? And Alex Grand kind of talked about that. He's like, well, that's the problem with comics. I'm like, but yeah, that's why I read them though, because I know they're going to be like, how are we going to make them matter or change them back? Like that to me is how, like, half the fun of it, right? It's like, okay, you explain this. Well, how are you going to get them back to where or is this going to be the new, or maybe they're accepted at how this is how it's going to be, right? Like that.
Yeah.
There is a sense of fun with these characters. And I think and again, I was right to an extent, because Slott there's all the groundwork for Superiors in this issue.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's
even the bit, especially if you're reading in guided view on the digital version, like the panels where it's like the two of them side, like Peter's head and Otto's head side by side, reading that in guided view where it goes from Peter's head to Otto's head, it's like, oh, and that wasn't planned. And credit to Ramita, because he was literally drawing until they absolutely had to get this to the printer. Like they kept adding pages to poor John Romita Jr. So credit to him.
And
go ahead.
And and Adam, before I throw it to you, I just want to say that like the brainwaves thing, like again, like that's all there, to set up for Superior, which is, I'm not sure if that's always an idea he wanted to maybe just throw it in there in case they could let him do it one day, or that was always a plan. I don't know, but regardless, this is a fantastic issue. So Adam, go ahead and with your grade, my friend.
I'd probably give it probably a B plus, maybe an A minus. I don't know.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean it's enjoyable. I think this is actually a great, like, what's great about this actually is anyone could pick this up and not really be lost. It's a pretty
exactly.
There was nothing. There's nothing leading up to this. Like this is the story is, well, there's the Aunt May wedding, sure, but that the main,
it's self-explanatory. It's a wedding.
The main supervillain plot is just all this issue, and that's what you come for, the supervillain fights, the supervillain fights, and you stay for the supporting characters. Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. I think it was pretty good. I was impressed that it's 3 books in one. It's 60 pages of story, with just John Romita Jr. doing the art.
I do wish it was different colors though. And Jansen's
yeah,
not my favorite.
I think it's fine.
I think it's fine.
I think it's a little better. I prefer it to the current stuff. But
really quickly,
we talk about that a lot on the main show.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really quickly, I want to make this. There is that Family Guy reference in here where everybody gets one.
That was.
I thought that was. I
hated that at the time. Having watched more Family Guy since, I think I appreciate it a little bit more as an adult. But like in my 20s, it really got, because I didn't watch a lot of Family Guy at that time, so
I'm not a big Family Guy person. I just know it from there, and I thought it was cool that he put it. He had it's a cute thing, because in retrospect, because I knew then it's a little forced there, but I mean, it's also
do
like
that.
it's a good Easter egg.
He'll do that though in the future with other TV shows that he's watching at the time.
Oh. You mean I know which one you're talking about, and that one is the most cringe. That is probably the most cringe pop culture reference that he throws in there. This one is so subtle that you don't necessarily have to know the context to think that the joke's funny, right? Because that joke's funny inherently. The other one later on, I will probably go on a rant on, but that's for a future episode of Slott Symposium.
So yeah. Go ahead, Adam. Go ahead and finish up your thoughts, and we'll wrap up the episode. I think.
Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty good. Yeah,
Well,
I like it.
I was talking about
I appreciate the you know, all the battles have led to this kind of, and it's like, well, what's the future of Dr. Octopus? You know?
Yeah, it asks a really great question. It tells an effective story. One of my criticisms of Slott sometimes is that he's very selective with his continuity, but he knows his continuity. So it's like this establishes that Doc Ock's his favorite character, like villain wise for Spider-Man, and so like he deserves a big milestone issue. It'll be interesting to see how this plays when we get to the end of Brand New Day, which is going to be actually next episode. There's a lot of issues between here and the end of the Brand New Day era that, you know, I do want to point out here because I got it up on the screen. This is one of the last Spider-Man John Romita Sr. covers. There's a few more, but there's only a handful of these left, and just a really good cover of John Romita. The Alex Ross, this was 50-50 issue. The other half of the books were the gatefold cover for John Romita. I think there might have been Quesada cover, but I may be wrong. There's the second printing, which has the big reveal of Otto and as a concept. You know, Otto is petty enough to screw up May's wedding, so that's kind of fun.
What I wanted to say too is this is like this feels like you could put this in almost like any era. Like this feels like kind of a 60s issue, a 70s issue. Like
it's very timeless.
Yeah.
It's very much a timeless era. There's not a lot of dated references in here. It feels like this is definitely the best book that he did during Brand New Day. And it felt like he was trying really hard. You know, he felt, I think, the responsibility of 100th issue has to mean something. You know, 100, you get the 6 arms. 200, you get the death of the burglar. 300 is Venom. 400 is death of the actress. 500 is like the celebration of Spider-Man. 600 is this. 700 is his death. And it's definitely, you know, the bookends of this big meta plot are here, and then 800 is, you know, his Slott's finale. 801 is technically it, but and then 900
for continuity purposes.
900 was what it was, which is super adaptoid for reasons.
But you know, so I guess my final thoughts on this so far is I think that Slott's really showing he knows the character well. Whether you like his interpretation of the character, that's a different story. Not you, obviously, Zach, but like in general, the proverbial you out there. I think that this is a great indication of what he can do as a writer. This is his ceiling, it feels like, and I mean that in the best way possible. Like if this is his, he can hit some great marks, and I'm glad. And I'm glad that it holds up, because I was always a little worried, like, are these going to be as good as I remember them? Because I loved this issue back in the day, and I'm glad I love it now. And it really, and like Jonah Jamerson Jr. is super great. I love Jonah Jamerson Jr. This is not his best era necessarily, I would say, but it's still great to see him. But this is not a bad issue. I think he drew a pretty, he storyboarded a pretty solid.
It definitely
issue.
has elements of Deadline Ramita. And again, this poor man, they kept adding more and more pages to try to get to that 100-page mark. And they just kept going. Some people complained about the Mary Jane at the very end, but it's like,
Whatever.
like I've seen far worse stuff with Ramita than here. Particularly with Klaus as his inker. So, yeah, I just think that bringing in Ramita though for this milestone issue, if you're not going to bring in like a Bagley or somebody like that, this works. This reaffirms that Ramita Jr. and by the cover Ramita Sr. are amongst the definitive Spider-Man artists of all time. So, like I say, we're not talking about the backups because the backups are kind of they're not relevant. They're 30 pages of fun and setting up stuff for the rest of Brand New Day. But yeah. So next episode, the docs here because we're going to be talking pretty extensively about the end of Slott's Brand New Day era. So, oh wait, we're going to be covering, where is it at? Oh, there's the structure. Okay. We're going to be covering issues 618, 619, 620, and 621. 4-issue arc plus 647. He wrote parts of 647, which is the last issue of the Brand New Day era. Basically wrapping one era up, beginning of the new era with big time. So kind of exciting to get past this Brand New Day era and kind of just walk through the next steps. If you like this type of episode, leave us that like, that share, that subscribe on whatever platform, if it's Comic Binge or on the Spideydude side. Like I say, we really do appreciate everybody that supports us here. Hopefully you like this stuff, man. We're really trying to.
I don't even care if they don't like it. I love doing it. That's all I care about. This is awesome.
Yeah, well, and I love doing it with you, man. That's the thing. So you see our patrons up on the screen. Thank you to everybody for supporting us here on the channels. Like I say, check out all of our other great shows. Throwing them all up on the screen that you see right here. We really do appreciate everybody that's watching us, that's supporting us. Find us all on our social medias at Spideydude Radio, at Spideydude Network, at Spideydude Radio on Twitter, at Spideydude Network on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Spideydude Radio Network. If you're listening to this audio edition, be sure to give us that 5-star review. Leave us a voicemail if you want your voice heard. Leave me an email at SpideyRadioNetwork@gmail.com. And for everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Paul for collaborating with us. And, of course, thanks to Adam, too. So thanks for watching. Thanks for being a part of the Spideydude Radio.